The Empire had conquered 417 worlds across 3 galaxies. Their warships numbered in the millions. Their soldiers were bred for combat from birth. They had never lost a single war in their 12,000 years of existence. When their scout vessels discovered Earth, they considered it nothing more than another primitive planet waiting to be claimed. The blue marble floating in space had no advanced weapons, no energy shields, and no interstellar travel capability. The conquest would take 3 days at most. Admiral and stood on the bridge of his command vessel, the Eternal Dominion, watching Earth grow larger on the viewing screen. His scales reflected the dim purple light of the bridge. Around him, his officers worked silently at their stations, preparing invasion protocols that had been used countless times before. Status of their defensive capabilities, undemanded. His tactical officer pulled up the data. Primitive projectile weapons, chemical explosives, basic nuclear technology. Their most advanced vessels can barely reach their own moon. We estimate total planetary surrender within 72 standard cycles. And made a sound of amusement. This would be the easiest conquest of his career. The High Command had assigned him this mission as a simple task before his retirement. Take the planet, harvest its resources, and add its population to the Empire's labor force. Nothing complicated. The invasion fleet emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation. 2,000 warships arranged in the traditional assault pattern surrounded Earth. Communication channels were opened, and the standard message of surrender was broadcast to every device on the planet capable of receiving signals. People of this world, the translation program announced in every human language simultaneously. You have been chosen to join the Empire. Resistance is mathematically impossible. Lay down your weapons. Surrender your governments. Accept your new roles as servants of the Empire. You have one planetary rotation to comply. Failure to surrender will result in the destruction of your largest population centers. On Earth, chaos erupted. Governments scrambled to respond. Military forces mobilized even as scientists confirmed that the alien fleet's technology was centuries beyond anything humanity possessed. The mathematics were simple. Humanity could not win this fight. Every simulation, every calculation, every logical analysis reached the same conclusion. Surrender was the only rational option. But something strange happened. Instead of white flags, the response that came from Earth was unexpected. A message was transmitted from the United Nations headquarters, assembled from the combined voices of every nation on the planet. This is Earth, we refuse. Admiral and stared at his communication officer with confusion. In all the records of conquests, no species had ever simply refused the terms of surrender when faced with such overwhelming force. It made no logical sense. Perhaps they misunderstood the translation, his second-in-command suggested. Should we clarify the consequences of resistance? Do it, and ordered. Show them what happens to those who resist. A single warship descended toward Earth and reduced a small, uninhabited island to glass with its energy weapons. The demonstration was broadcast worldwide. The message was clear. This is what awaits you if you do not surrender. The response came within hours. Missiles launched from every continent on Earth, streaking upward toward the invading fleet. They were primitive weapons, chemical rockets with nuclear warheads. The defense systems destroyed them easily, swatting them from the sky like insects. But instead of despair, more missiles came. Then more. Aircraft took to the skies. Submarines surfaced and launched everything they had. Every weapon humanity possessed was thrown at the invaders in a storm of defiance. They are wasting their resources, the tactical officer reported. None of their weapons can penetrate our shields. They must know this. And watched the display with growing unease. He had seen desperate species fight before, but this was different. There was something in the patterns of their attacks, something that suggested this was not desperation. It was determination. Begin the ground assault, he commanded. We will teach them the cost of resistance. Landing craft descended on major cities around the world. The soldiers inside were the finest in the empire. 8 feet tall, armored in energy-resistant battle suits, armed with weapons that could vaporize a human from 100 meters away. Each soldier was worth 100 of any species they had encountered before. The first reports came back positive. Landing zones were secured. Human military forces were falling back. The conquest was proceeding as expected. Then the reports changed. In every city on every continent, the humans did not flee. They fought. They fought with guns that could barely scratch armor. They fought with knives and clubs when their ammunition ran out. They fought with their bare hands. Old men and women who could barely walk took up weapons. Children threw rocks. People who had never held a weapon in their lives stood beside soldiers, refusing to run. A squad leader reported watching a human charge directly at him with nothing but a metal pipe after his weapon had been destroyed. The human knew he would die. He charged anyway. His last words were a scream of defiance as the energy beam struck him down. And then another human took his place. And another. The forces captured cities, but they could not hold them. The moment their attention moved elsewhere, the humans attacked again. They struck from buildings. They struck from tunnels. They struck from shadows. They used their primitive explosives to collapse bridges on patrols. They poisoned water supplies. They sabotaged equipment. They fought every single moment of every single day. Admiral and received a report from a commander in a region called Russia. The humans there had burned their own cities rather than let them fall into hands. They destroyed their own food supplies. They made every inch of ground cost the invaders dearly. The same reports came from places called Vietnam, Afghanistan, Ukraine, and dozens of others. This species had been fighting each other for their entire existence. They had refined resistance into an art form. 3 days passed, then 3 weeks, then 3 months. They had superior technology, superior numbers, and superior weapons. But they were fighting an enemy that simply refused to accept defeat. For every human killed, 2 more seemed to appear. Every destroyed city became a recruitment ground for more fighters. The Empire had never experienced anything like this. Their entire military doctrine was built on the assumption that conquered species would eventually surrender when faced with impossible odds. But these humans seemed to draw strength from impossible odds. They told stories of something called Thermopylae, where 300 of their warriors had faced millions. They spoke of a place called Stalingrad, where they had fought building by building until nothing remained but rubble and still did not surrender. They had a phrase they repeated constantly: "Give me liberty or give me death," and began to understand something terrible. They had never truly faced an enemy like this because most species were rational. When victory became impossible, rational beings accepted defeat to preserve their lives. But humans were not entirely rational. They placed concepts like freedom, dignity, and defiance above their own survival. They would rather die fighting than live as servants. A year into the invasion, they had lost more soldiers than they had in the previous century of conquests combined. Human resistance had only grown stronger. They had learned weaknesses. They had adapted captured technology. They had united in ways they never had before, setting aside their own conflicts to face the common enemy. Underground laboratories worked day and night. Human scientists reverse-engineered weapons. Human engineers built new tools of war. Human strategists developed tactics that exploited every assumption. And all across the planet, billions of humans woke up every day choosing to fight rather than surrender. The first warship fell when a team of humans managed to plant explosives in its engine core. They had sacrificed 40 soldiers just to get one person close enough to complete the mission. The volunteer who carried the bombs knew it was a one-way trip. He smiled as he armed the detonators. More ships fell. The humans were learning, growing, adapting. Admiral and sat alone in his quarters, reviewing the casualty reports. His fleet was at 60% strength. His ground forces were exhausted. and the humans showed no signs of slowing down. For the first time in his long career, he faced a question he had never considered before. What happens when your enemy would rather die than surrender? He called a meeting with his commanders. The message was clear. This conquest was costing more than it was worth. The resources required to maintain the occupation exceeded the resources the planet could provide, and the humans were only getting stronger. "We must send for reinforcements," one commander argued. "Bring more ships, more soldiers, crush them completely." "And how many will that take?" another replied. "We have already committed more forces to this single planet than to any conquest in our history, and still they fight." And made his decision. For the first time in 12,000 years, the Empire ordered a withdrawal, not a tactical retreat, not a repositioning of forces, a complete withdrawal. They were leaving Earth. As the fleet rose into orbit for the final time, they broadcast one last message to the planet below. It was not a threat. It was not a promise of return. It was a warning sent to every species in the known galaxies. "Earth is under quarantine. Do not approach. Do not contact. Do not invade. The species known as humans does not surrender. Ever." Years later, when humanity finally developed their own interstellar travel, they discovered that the warning had been translated and shared across 1,000 civilizations. Earth was not listed as a primitive world or a conquered territory. It was marked as something far more significant. A world to be avoided, a species to be feared, not because humans were the strongest or the most advanced, but because they possessed something that no empire, no weapon, and no overwhelming force could ever defeat: the absolute refusal to give up. Humanity took their place among the stars, carrying with them the same spirit that had driven their ancestors to fight against impossible odds. They built alliances with species who valued courage. They stood against tyranny wherever they found it, and whenever they faced enemies who demanded their surrender, they answered the same way they always had: "We refuse." The galaxy learned a valuable lesson from the failed invasion of Earth. You can defeat a species with better weapons. You can overwhelm them with numbers. You can destroy their cities and occupy their lands. But you cannot conquer a people who have decided that freedom is worth more than life itself. Nobody had told this truth about humans, but the universe would never forget it.